If you could text your younger self on the day you started your first company, what would you say?
Don't do it. No, just kidding. um, um, I think there are some people that gave me some really good advice that I did not follow. And I would say, listen to the advice that you get. Humble yourself a little bit to know that you don't have all the answers. That would definitely be one. And then I think the other thing of like, you will survive this.
Hi there. On the latest episode of How I Broke Into Tech, I chatted with Sunny Washington, an incredible entrepreneur based out of Utah who started 2 companies, including her most recent company, OrcaPanda. We chatted about all types of things, including how Sunny got into tech, but also how she's navigated being an entrepreneur and how she's balanced that with also raising a family. It was a lot of fun. It was really interesting, and I had a really great time. Hope you enjoy. Okay, welcome to another episode of How I Broke Into Tech. I'm so excited to be here with Sunny Washington today. Sunny, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Let's get started with a quick introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what you're working on.
Yeah, so I have been doing tech companies and startups for the last 20 plus years. Maybe not the traditional path into tech, which we'll be talking a little bit about today. But there's something about building something, building a product, talking to customers, learning about their businesses and how you can help them that I truly just love. And then the exit is a bonus. So, I keep chasing that. But yeah, I worked in edtech, I worked in GovTech, I worked in B2B SaaS, and now doing something in AI.
Excellent. And you said the exit is a bonus. We'll get to that a little bit later, but Sunny has sold one of her startups before. And from what I understand, you have another startup that you're currently working on.
Yes, we've got OrcaPanda that I'm working on. And to be transparent, the company that I did sell, I didn't make any money, but I was part of I lost money on that one, but I was part of Instructure, employee 7, and that took off. And so I was very fortunate to be early there and get that incentive to help build a company.
Can't wait to chat a little bit more about that and, all of the learnings that you had along the way. Let's go back a little bit to before you got into tech. Tell me about what you were doing, from a job perspective before your first tech job.
Yeah, I started out in banking, retail banking. So I was my first job out of college was I was a bank manager. And I think now who puts a 20-year-old in charge of a bank? I have no idea, but they did. And I although young, I was surrounded by a lot of mature and older people who had made a career out of banking. So I truly did think that that was my path forward. So I could just envision me working up that career ladder.
What did you love about working at the bank?
I think at the time it was I was a teller in college, so it was a better job than maybe some of the other summer jobs that were available to me. Um, I love to count money. Like I love the physical motion of cash and like counting that. It's weird and it really gross actually. But I think I just love that environment. I loved meeting other business owners. And as a bank manager, what I did appreciate is they invested heavily in my education. So I learned, you operate a branch like you would a business. You have to know HR and you have to handle operations and auditing and you have sales targets and all of these things. And so I think it just gave me a well-roundedness of what it would take to at that young age to understand all the different aspects of a company.
I totally empathize with that. When I was younger, I ran New York City's oldest magic shop. And again,
Crazy.
doing that, you're in operations, you're in marketing, you're in
Yep.
customer service, you're kind of like, it's a small business, right? Just like a
Yep.
bank branch, I'm sure to some degree is a small business. And I found that when I went back to school to get my MBA, nothing seemed that hard to me because I had a foundation in all of these different parts of running a business that you just kind of learn a little bit more about the formulaic process behind an MBA school. And so I always found that to be an advantage and something that I took with me wherever I went. Have you found that as well?
Absolutely. It is hard for me to picture myself in any sort of role where like I'm just doing this. Uh, and because when you do startups or you're running a bank branch, there's so many different aspects to the business. And I think I appreciated the variety of it. I think I appreciated um like being able to try things out and learning from that. Um, and I think I also appreciated like the mentorship that I would get because it could observe other people who'd been around and say, okay, that's how they're talking to them, or that's how they're addressing that issue and learning. So yeah, it seemed like a very natural path to like stay in banking. Um, I look back now and I'm like, man, that would have been hard for me to like where would I be now? But that would have been really hard for me. And I think like fundamentally it just was clear that I was not built for that long term.
Well, there was a moment, right? So, from what I understand in our previous conversation, you were interested in then taking that and going into investment banking. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was like this thing of because within banking, there's investment banking and there's all these different, you can get into lending and all of that stuff. And I went out to New York and I was just in love with the city and the energy and I thought, okay, this is where I go. This is my path. And so let me get into investment banking and get the certifications that I needed and all of that. Um, I was literally in the World Trade Center August of 2021. And then September 11th happened and it just, the whole thing just crumbled. And so I remember at the bank thinking, oh, this is where I would stay. And realizing that's probably not what I wanted to do. And I went to a tech company. They were selling, they had built certifications for the Microsoft Office suites. And it was a lot of people from Novell and WordPerfect were there, worked for the two big tech companies in Utah at the time. Um, so I went in with no understanding of tech other than like what I had been exposed to, and was starting to sell certifications.
What was the moment when you were at the bank and you said, okay, I have to find something else now? And how did you kind of land in the tech space? Because I can imagine there's a lot of different places you can go from there. Was it intentional? Was it, kind of by happenstance? What was that journey like as you were kind of bridging that moment in your life?
It was very non-intentional. I think I was just looking for a job, and as a bank manager, you do have sales targets. And I found that, I often had some of the best performing metrics. So I thought, I'll do sales. And this happened to come up. I didn't even understand what a certification was. I mean, I knew Microsoft Office, that was about it. But I went in there and gosh, it was like just so like you were James and you could people were just kind of talking and it was like casual and people were like saying, hey, let's try this with this strategy and doing that. And I think just seeing that kind of environment for the first time was really eye-opening where banking was much more structured. There's a very strict dress code, you open and you close, the branch and procedures, and it's like, oh my gosh, like these two people are talking and you're going to work late to hit your numbers, or if you're done for the month, maybe they take off, the last week or whatever that is. And I just found that to be a super attractive work environment at the time. And I'll never forget having a manager and she said, we need a we need like a sale. We need some sort of marketing something. And I was throwing out ideas, and she's like, let's do that. And I was like, wait,
Yeah.
you don't have to get approval, you know? And so that was really fun for me to see and experience.
Yeah, I think there's something really refreshing about the tech space. There's a facade in corporate America, where I think there's an expectation that you put on a mask and you go to the office and you're dressed to the nines, and you know, um, that's a lot to take with you, I think. And so, kind of going into a work environment where you can just be yourself and be comfortable, and to your point, do projects with very little red tape or anything blocking
Mhm.
you. um there's some freedom in that. That's a lot of fun. Certainly one of my favorite parts about working in tech. I remember when I was done with business school and I was interviewing for jobs, a lot of the jobs have that requirement, business casual, or
Yeah,
even more than that, right? Like, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
so I have to wear khakis and a button-down shirt to work every day. Okay, that's interesting. But if it's for the right job, yeah, sure, why not? It's just what I'm wearing. And then I remember interviewing with Amazon and everybody's wearing t-shirts and jeans, and I was like, oh, this is
yeah,
great. And even the conversation, the interview felt more natural and less formal.
yeah.
I was like, this is my place. These are my people. So I really, I appreciate that. And that resonates with me. Um, going back, you've said that you don't see yourself as a technical person, but in that role, you helped launch computer literacy programs in 80 plus countries. How did that start? And what was the
Yeah.
moment where you felt like, I get this. I can do this. Tech makes sense to me.
I grew up my dad was an electrical engineer growing up. So I think I had natural exposure to tech tools, computers. We had a PC at home, which none of my friends did, in a way that I just didn't understand that that was a unique experience. So it wasn't that I was, like against it. It was just like, I think I equated being in tech as like building computers or, I
The
dared to
hardware.
an yeah, or like I did take an MS Doc class when I was in the seventh grade, and we ones and zeros and all of that. So I think that I assumed that that's what that meant. But what we realized at this company that I was at is, as computers were rolling out and they were showing up in classrooms for the first time, you had a whole slew of population that had never done anything with a computer. And so, as much as it's great you put one there, if they don't know how to use it, what true value is it adding? And teachers are busy people, so don't like don't give them a project if it's not helping them. Like they don't have time to, spend time learning it. So at the time, the CEO decided to come up with the digital literacy program certification, and there was great need for it in a lot of different countries because there and even to do like a Microsoft certification, there was a step before that that needed to happen. And I'll never forget like the number of times where, to me, it's like second nature, but people accomplishing that certification, it meant something to them. It was like a piece of paper saying, I know computers, and gave them confidence and the ability to feel like they could apply for jobs, other jobs and upskill. So I think there was something just deeply satisfying and from a mission standpoint to be able to offer that. And then see it not just as a US phenomenon, but like literally all over the world. They were using our program. So that to me, even though the company was larger at that point, there was a small kind of tiger team where we were working kind of outside of, we were a little bit secluded and we had the ability to go do that. And so that, truly felt more like a startup at the time because there was like five or six of us and that's all we did.
What did you find to be the most challenging part of scaling computer literacy, across all of these regions? Was there one region in particular? Was it equal?
So there were just regions that appreciate like standardized testing more. So your Asian countries tended to do more in that area. And then also I think I look back now with, maybe more insight and understanding is um teaching computers, having a certification, that should just be like base level at this point. Like you should know these things. Do you need to actually validate that at this point? For all the people that are growing up with these tools, maybe not, So I think
Right.
at that point, it's like really defining a category, and that can be very challenging because it wasn't like, hey, we're just replacing your math test. No, it's like, oh, here's this whole new program, and here's curriculum, and here's all the things that you need to start having your students learn. If your teachers don't know it, then this becomes really challenging.
So just to clarify, then you're building this program, and the goal is essentially to get the teachers to become computer literate or certified so that they can then teach it to the students, essentially, or they can use the tool that's in the classroom.
Yeah, and the goal is that, students could get certified too. So I think there's often this time of, we think a lot about credentialing, right? So as not all kids are going to go and get a degree, but what credentials can they add to showcase what they learned? And so you have a lot of programs Adobe has a program, Autodesk has a program. They all have these certification programs because it allows for kids to not only learn their software suite, but then also get credentialed after that.
Yeah, makes sense. It's wild to think about a time when there were folks out there questioning how and why they should use a computer.
I think we are back in this moment again
With AI.
with AI. I mean, there are I draw a lot of similarities to this, which is like I get that that's there. But what, like I'm going to make a haiku. So, like, how did that actually bring value to my life? And if you think about, like, for me, the first time I had a computer at home, what was I doing? I was playing Pong. I was doing like MS Paint, so I was doing things that actually were entertaining, but it wasn't like dramatically changing my life. And I think that that's what we're seeing in AI, just at a very, very hyper fast cycle.
I think you're right. I'm reminded, I think I saw a meme on social media this week of a protest in the 1970s of teachers advocating against the use of calculators in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you can kind of keep going back and drawing these analogies.
They said the same thing about books, so it's like,
Right.
get your head out the book, go out and read. And now we're saying, get off the phones or get off the iPads, go out and play, so it's whatever medium, it's just different times.
Yeah. So what do you think was do you have any stories of like one teacher or school system in particular that was like, we don't get it. This doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah, well, sort of. So I have this one experience where, we had a statewide contract. And so we went to their annual teacher conference where this is where they're getting, professional development credits, right? So we set up a testing center and they were going to come in and all the teachers were going to come take the certification, if that was what they wanted to do and get credits toward it. There was one particular teacher, and I kid you not, she probably took the test 8 times and failed every single time. And yeah, and I look back now with my understanding of where technology has evolved. She kept getting questions incorrect about operating systems. Just couldn't understand what an operating system did. She didn't understand RAM, kilobit versus megabit. She just didn't understand that. I think she taught English. And granted, like you wanted the teachers to know how to use computers because she was going to have kids write papers and, do all that stuff. And I remember her turning around and, after literally the 8th time that she just failed that test. And she teared up and she's like, maybe I'm just not meant to be a teacher. And I look back now and I was like, she is meant to teach English. She was not like, what does it matter if she didn't know what an operating system is? But at that time, we felt like that was a very important skill. Today, I don't think we would even question that that would be a requirement for an English teacher. That moment has stuck with me my whole career of, you know, for nerds, for people in STEM, for people like me, maybe we want to get into the guts of it. But I think technology is only a tool. It's not it's not your everything, and it doesn't define, like, we have so many roles of what we value. Yes, they use technology, but do they have to have the same kind of skill sets if you're someone who's like building the application or whatever? And so I think about that a lot, because I wish now, with my understanding, to say, no, you're an excellent English teacher. Don't even worry. You're an excellent English teacher. Just be an English teacher.
Right.
Because the technology will come in such a way that this doesn't matter that you need to know all these operating system questions.
And you still see that. I mean, to the analogy we talked about before with AI, right? Where what I see all the time now is AI is the hammer and everything is a nail. So it's like, how do we do all of these things with AI? And I think there's some truth to that, where you kind of have to take that approach to really find some of the use cases.
Yeah.
But then as the technology matures, you realize, oh, hey, there's actually, a handful of these use cases that didn't require this and are actually, more gracefully handled by another system.
Yeah. And I think fundamentally, AI is very exciting. And you talk to anyone who's digging in, or like, what models are you using? Have you checked out this and all of that? Does the average end user care which model? No, they don't care. What they want is the output that they want, that AI is supposed to make easier for them. But if we make them like go compare models and do all of these things, it's like that same moment of, do we want the English teacher learning what an operating system like? Probably not. So, now it's super fascinating to me, super fascinating to others. Is it a requirement to say that, like, you need to know these things in order to use AI? I hope not. I hope that's not the direction we're going.
It won't be. There's just no way, right? We're still
I hope so,
early
yeah.
on. We're still early on, so you have a lot of early adopters that get in the weeds. But I think as these things develop, the use cases become much more accessible, and frankly, a lot of the stuff under the hood should be hidden from an end user because they just don't need to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I right after that career, I went to Instructure. And it was so that's where I was early as part of that employee 7 there. We were the first native cloud learning management system. So I'm having to go in and say, this is the cloud and this is why it's great. And they're like, yeah, I don't care, because we already have these servers and we've got a whole team managing them. I don't understand why, like, the cloud would be valuable. And then we would talk about EC2 or your S3 instance and, like, all of these things. I don't think they care. Like, they just want it to work. When a student wants to go and take a test, just make sure it works so they can go take their test.
I love that you kind of are following these trends of innovative technology, Sonny, and you're like, okay, first is computers, before everybody had a computer, and now everybody's computer literate. Now we're talking about the cloud, and your employee 7 at Instructure. What was that like? I mean, just being at, a startup like that at such an early stage, and then the challenges obviously that you face trying to educate people on the cloud. Number one, like, what is this thing? And then two, help them understand why they should use it instead of on-site server.
Yeah, it was. I am very grateful for the experience that I had at Instructure. I had someone that I knew at another company. I had actually applied there previously, and I didn't want to take a pay cut, so I ended up just staying at the job. And then they exited months later, and I was like, that was a huge mistake, you know. So I, like for 10.
Timing is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but he called me back and I thought, oh, maybe he's like interested in hiring me. And I went, and then there were these two students, these two, graduate students there. And he's like, I want you to meet Brian and Devlin. And they're saying, we're building an LMS. I'm like, okay, cool. Everybody has an LMS. I mean, that's just the way I thought. But then I saw their technology and I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting because they were doing things that I hadn't seen in an LMS. So when they raised their first round of funding, I think at that time it might have been called a seed round. It'd probably be called an angel round at this point, as times have changed. And they hired me as their first salesperson, non-engineering hire. Went in there and, I took a pay cut, I was willing to, do that pay cut. And it was so early, like, even though like LMSs were established, there was not really a strategy of how to get in. Like, and so all of that discovery had to be done. Like, who's the decision maker, getting a landscape of the competitors, developing relationships with these instructors and stuff. And I think one of the things that that first year was very, very difficult. We had a lot of challenges because you had some big players that dominated the market. And if you've ever worked in education or sold education, you know that they move slow. And so it wasn't the kind of thing that, you could put up like a Shopify page and people were buying. Like, it was nothing like that. There's RFPs and all of that. So we started, building that foundation, submitting a RFP. He had a proposal, which meant that we could use that as a template to respond to more. We're having to write our own disaster recovery plans for the first time. Like, all of that kind of stuff had to be established. So it was fun and exciting in the sense of like, I like doing a lot of different things. But in terms of outcomes, like, we weren't selling. We didn't have that momentum. And then it was like a moment through some press and some other things that happened, and we won a large contract that it felt like it switched overnight.
The water
I remember,
have started.
yeah, I remember like being at the office at, I don't know, probably midnight, and we're still building the website because we knew the story was coming out, that next morning. And then like showing up, and then there's thousands of leads in our Salesforce instance. Like that was so awesome to be a part of and so hard to understand. And then
what did it feel like that day when you get into the office and see all those leads? Like, walk me through the emotions of that.
I don't think I quite understood what was happening. I do remember one of the sales directors, he looked up and he said, we have like 10,000 leads in here or something. Like, it was just an insane number. And I was like, there's not even 10,000 higher education institutions. So like, so you're just kind of like, what is happening? And it was exciting. And I remember like the first big contract you win, like, you're just so excited to like see all that hard work pay off. And I spent a lot of time meeting with schools and doing demos. And I'll never forget clicking on the back button of our system, and it went back, and we got like standing applause. So that's how bad of technology that they had been used to using. That,
my goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And then for cloud, it was, yes, like, you had to educate and you had to help them understand. And we were replacing potentially people and their roles and all of that. So that was a hurdle. But what did you have? They didn't have to have the burden of buying and maintaining additional servers. And when you have something like a semester where everybody's on the LMS the first 2 weeks of school and everyone's on the LMS the last 2 weeks of school at the same time. And the system's crashing. I mean, you don't buy for that when you're buying your own servers, right? You're buying for kind of what's the best, middle ground. And now that they were able to scale up, like they started to understand the benefit. And I think if you went back and asked any of them, would you go back to hosting your own? They'd say absolutely not. That is not where we should be spending our time or our resources. So yeah, I look back now and I think I was incredibly fortunate to have been that early and to have had that experience. And Instructure went public in was it 2015? Yeah. So, I started there in 2010. So if you can imagine how quickly that grew and to be part of that. But funnily enough, we had moved into this really nice office space. This is probably like the fourth office I had worked out of, and we had cardboard tops for tables at one, and things like that. And here we are in this gorgeous space, and we got engineers riding a scooter and eating cereal at the same time.
Visualization of the engineer eating
it.
cereal is so good.
Yeah. Nerf guns on the sales team right? Like that is all happening, and I thought, none of these guys, the new people, will understand how hard we had to work to get here. And that was hard for me to see. I was actually kind of depressed at that move.
How did you kind of reconcile that? Because as a company grows, that's always going to happen, right? Where you have people that join later on that weren't there for those early hiccups. So what was kind of your mental process for acknowledging that, working through it, deciding how to, how that was going to make you feel at work?
I think it was an unexpected feeling. And then I remember seeing one of the co-founders and I said, this is hard. He goes, yeah, right. Like, so I think we found some solidarity with each other. In terms of like, how did I like rectify that and how did I like adjust to that? It just is what, you were just going to hire different kind of people who would and they had a very specific job and a role, and they would never understand where we had come from. I'd be in the elevator and someone would say, oh, are you new? And I'd say, no, you're new. I'm not new. So maybe I did a little bit of I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder to say like, no, like I've been here for a long time.
Being part of Instructure and that growth, right, over that 5-year period while you were there, I'm curious if there's any kind of special sauce that you can identify that was like, this is what made this company really special. We knew it from the jump. And these are the types of things to look out for in future companies, in future startups. Is like I think that it's important to find companies that have something that's differentiated or special or solving a problem that, others may not be there. It certainly sounds like moving the LMS to the cloud was one first mover advantage, maybe on that one. Was there anything else that kind of stood out? Was it the technical efficiency? You mentioned the going back button. Like, is it just being a great tech product in this space plus the first mover advantage? Was kind of those combination of factors that you think drove that growth?
I mean, there's a lot of things, and can you replicate it with the exact same formula? I don't know. Yeah. I'm still trying to figure that out. But what Instructure had was a superior technology. They had disenfranchised customers who had felt like they were paying a lot of money for something not very great. And then even when they switched to another provider, that bigger provider just gobbled them up and they were back to square one. So there was a lot of disenfranchisement. I think timing has everything to do with it. And that's like, there's just this bit of luck that happened. I think we had good leadership. We had a CEO who had, he said from the beginning, we're going to go public. We're going to do this. And he was okay going against the grain. And I think in some ways because we didn't necessarily come from academia, that worked to our advantage because we could say, listen, we're not the academic experts here. You are, but we're going to build the best tools for you so it can, you can put your courses online. And I think we cared deeply about our customers and our community.
Yeah.
And I think that made a difference. And, we had visionary founders who understood like what they were building. They had personal experience of hating the system that they had to use when they were in college. So that, that use case was pretty deep to them. What we did
was internalized.
Absolutely. They knew the problems. But then as technologists, they could say, hey, if I was building this is how I would address it. And so they did that, and they got they interviewed, hundreds and hundreds of people to identify like were they on the right track. So I think a lot of things happen for that. You meet the right investors, you meet the right first customers that will advocate for you. There's all these things that I think made Instructure a very special place. And as hard as it was, and it wasn't all like rainbows and ponies, but I think fundamentally we cared about what we were doing, and we tried to be the best at it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to summarize it. And I love hearing the stories about, the interviews and putting on that customer hat. And I think that, as long as companies continue to put customers first and foremost, to really proactively solve the problems that they either hear about or the problems that customers may not even know they have yet, businesses will probably build very successful products. I think that's a good segue to the next kind of part of your life, which was then you went off and founded your own company, and you did that during COVID. So tell us a little bit about what that was like and walk us through the journey there.
Yeah, I actually started this company in 2014. So I left right before the IPO because, again, I was looking around and I was like, hey, I want to get back to building. And so let me go look for maybe another startup that's has the shape of Instructure. Couldn't find it. And then I got introduced to this company in San Francisco called Spire Global, and they build and launch CubeSats. And I met the founder. I met part of the team, and they said, listen, we want an education program. They felt really strongly about having that next generation of students that were interested in STEM. And space is a great way to do that. So it was an exciting opportunity. And I look back and I was like, wow, I didn't know anything. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't, I just was like, I think this is an opportunity. And I remember going to the CEO of Instructure at the time, telling him about the opportunity. And I'm kind of hoping he talked me out of it because there's like a risk and a jump. And, and I was like, maybe I can be comfortable here, and he said, you have to do this. And I was like, I know, right? Yeah. So I did it, raised money, built a really fun product, hardware, software, all of that. And it was a very different kind of startup than Instructure was. It was very hard, a lot of challenges. I think what I realize now is it's very different being employee 7 than being a founder, that level of responsibility. And I didn't quite appreciate that until I was in that situation. But by, 2018, 2019, things continued to be hard. And one way that we could expand was going into other countries. And we tried to set up partnerships with China, and then there was trade wars and that, so it was just like some of these hurdles that I couldn't see how that next step to growth was, because we had raised a venture. The expectation was that kind of growth. And so when COVID happened, it was like, here we are, a hands-on STEM product for students working in teams. And so it felt like, okay, this is probably something that would be good for another company who's already in this space, but it's a very difficult company to have just this product on its own. So was able to sell the company, and what I cared most about was having our customers taken care of, because we had some really phenomenal schools and district leaders that we were working with. So I wanted to make sure that the investment that they made would still exist with this new company. So it was a really good match. But
What was the
really
acquisition process like?
Yeah, I think I sat with one of my investors, identified a handful of companies or organizations that we thought might be a fit. And then kind of went through like, how can we get intro to them? How, is there a connection there? And you just start that conversation. And if it probably like from conversation to signed and delivered is probably about a year-long process. It's not, doesn't mean that you're still, spending as much time on it, but it does take time, and so for me, because it was not a cash windfall or anything like that, it was just about, let's just make sure that these customers are taken over. It's handing over the keys to the technology, the codes, trademarks, all of that stuff, and then working with them on messaging to communicate to everybody.
And then going back, you're a founder, you're, raising a family during that time. How did you balance the two? I'm sure there's a ton of entrepreneurs out there listening, that struggle with that would love to hear, how somebody who was there and lived it and breathed it kind of was able to do it, and maybe some of the ways that it was difficult, maybe some of the ways that you feel like you did it successfully. So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I should be giving advice, but I could tell you what I went through, whether or not I just assume all my kids are going to need therapy. But yeah, I mean, don't all. But my daughter, so I had a daughter at the time when I started the company. So she was elementary school, maybe like fifth, sixth grade, and which is great because whoever her teacher was, they were going to be a guinea pig. So I could come in and teach and get kids to use and I think from her standpoint, she thought that was pretty cool that her mom was, in the classroom and doing cool science experiments with her classmates. But I between 2016 and 2018. So, I mean, I was raising money in 2016, and my brother passed away in an accident very suddenly. And it just rocked my whole world. I just didn't even know. Yeah, thank you. And I just, at the time we were struggling to raise money. And I had a lot of insecurities about my investors getting spooked because, well, Sunny's not going to be able to like focus on the company, So it was really, really difficult. And I don't think I handled it well, which was I just didn't talk to anyone. I didn't talk about it. I didn't share the struggles. I just kind of disappeared for a week and then I showed back up. I didn't know how, because it was just too painful. Then in 2017, I find out I'm unexpectedly pregnant. And I thought, are you kidding me? Just had this drama, with my personal life. And here I am pregnant. And I really did not know how to talk about it or tell people at work. Inevitably, it ended up kind of being like a happy hour situation where they'd be like, you want a drink? And I'd be like, so like that's how it would kind of come out. I was very self-conscious about it because I just kept worrying that people were like thinking that I wouldn't be capable anymore. The thing is, I was so wrong. Everybody, like from board members to investors to my team, so excited.
I love
like way more excited for me than I was for myself. And so 2018, my daughter Harper was born. And again, in a situation where I'm raising money and I need to raise capital, I didn't get to take a break. So, 2 weeks later, I'm back at work after a C-section, and I am just operating, like just doing it. And I really paid for that many, many months later, because I think in my head, I was doing everything that I thought everybody wanted me to do, even though it was so painful inside, if that makes sense. But I thought I was like playing the part. And I think when I did that, I, number one, wasn't operating with a clear head. But number two, I think that I was very wrong about the perception that people were having. I had a narrative in my head that wasn't true. And so I look back now and I'm like, gosh, like there would have been resources and help and people wanted, like I could have gotten help and I didn't. And so that was a tough realization that I had. But I will say that the one thing I noticed is, when I had my oldest, it was at that one company. They had never had anyone go on maternity leave and return to work like that. They were like, we don't know what to do with you. Like, and so I didn't feel at all comfortable.
The culture wasn't there for it.
No. And, yeah, so I wasn't in a position to ask for a lot of exceptions. But this time around, I'm the CEO. So if I want to bring my baby to work, I can bring my baby to work, So there was a little bit of, I guess, less pressure on that front, because everybody knew I had a kid. I could talk about it,
Sure. It's part of your life. Very,
yeah.
very, very important part of your life.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the journey I went through. It was hard. But I think that as women, we often put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I think now if I had sat back and be like, is this me or is this like a real thing? And I love that times have changed. And I mean, I remember at one time, this is like probably early in at my company, I saw we were on a Zoom call or something, and one of the founders in the cohort had a baby on his shoulder and he was like rocking it. And that blew my mind.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, is this acceptable now? Like it just blew my mind. So I'm really glad that we can have balance, but I will say, I don't know what balance is. I don't know. Is that like 50-50 every day? Is it like, and I think that what you will find is there will be periods, especially if you're a founder, that you have to spend 98%, to get something done. But then you're also going to have those moments where you're not needed as much, and you should take those moments.
I think that's a really good way to put it. Just a natural segue for the next question here, which is, definitely the expectations of a female founder are going to be different, right? And I think you mentioned there's a pressure on that you were putting on yourself. What advice would you give to other women founders out there who are, starting a company and balancing a family in this day and age?
I'd say find your support network. Find your people, and they can be men and they can be other women. They could find a safe place to just talk to people and be real. I think one of the challenges of being a founder is it is exhausting in the sense that you have to always feel like you're on. You have to be on for your team. You have to be on for your investors. You have to be on for meetings and for customers. And sometimes you want to say like, I hate everyone and I hate this job and I can't believe that I'm doing it. But you do that with a safe group of people, which is like letting that frustration out, or having someone who's like truly empathetic to the situation that you're going through because they've gone through it themselves. So I think number one, find your people. And I think the one thing that I've learned now is because I understand like that persona you have to be. Sometimes when I talk to another founder and they'll be like, yeah, I'm just kind of having a hard time raising my money, or yeah, we're just kind of dealing with a situation at work, and they're still trying to like put that shield up. I'll be like, doesn't it suck so bad? And they're like, oh my gosh, can I say this? Am I?
Thank
Yeah,
you for saying it.
yeah, because I've just allowed them to be open about it. Um, but it is very, very exhausting. But you have to find your people. I think the other thing too, as a female founder, yeah, there are stats. Female founders raise less capital. Female founders make less money. Yeah, all of these things. But that's not the battle you're fighting. The battle you're fighting is for the success of your company. So you can see that. But if you are truly going to let those statistics make you think that you're less than, or that you're not, it's not possible, I think then this is probably not the avenue, that because it will never feel fair. It will never feel fair. So I see it, that 2% number has not moved up or down in, 10 years in any significant way. But I'm not raising a fund that says I invest in female founders. I'm not doing that. I am building OrcaPanda, an AI company. We need capital to do that. So I will find the investors that are most likely interested in the problem that we're solving. And it just so happens that I'm a woman.
Yeah. So you're doing it again, OrcaPanda. Is it the new company that you founded? And what's your vision for OrcaPanda? What does it look like? What does success for this one look like?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think it was going to be a very tough sell for me to do another company, because the last one was so hard and very traumatic with my life personally, that I didn't know if I had the energy to do something like this again. But then this wonderful thing called ChatGPT rolled around, and I started playing with it, and I started thinking of all the various applications of where it could be used and where it could actually like improve lives. So I was really intrigued. And then I met my co-founder. My co-founder is Zach Holmquist, who's also former co-founder of a company called Teen, but they exited. And we went to lunch, and we were like, actually, one of my good mutual friend introduced us. He's like, you need to go to lunch with Zach. And I was like, okay. So go to lunch with Zach. And he and I could not stop talking about the possibilities. And I was like, hey, let's do a working session. And I was like, man, I feel like it's kind of time to build again. Maybe it's that wave of like, there's something new here and I want to see. So I think the magic formula for this was, I saw it as timing was right to build something. And then an incredible, co-founder that I could partner with, and that I would be very proud to, like honored to work with him because of his brilliance. And so, yeah, I felt like that. But what does success look like? I think success it's not necessarily like a dollar amount or like an exit. Yes, some exit. I would like an exit. But also it's a little bit of proving to myself that like I've learned all these lessons and I'm smarter this time around and I'll do this better. But also I think our mission is building software that's hirable. And if everybody can have an extension of themselves to do all the grunt work and the things that we shouldn't spend time as humans, and we're not on our computers as much because we've got OrcaPanda doing a lot of that stuff for you, like I think we win. And so there's no denying that I see a future where OrcaPanda is integral into every workplace and every workforce. And I just want to see it out there. So I want the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I buy the vision. I'm here for it. What's your like one thing of, hey, I'm gonna put OrcaPanda on this and I never have to do this again? Do you have one thing in mind that you're like, this is the solve for me personally?
I think if I could take an example from today, people who are using AI, they're spending a lot of time prompt jockeying. You know, this and that. I don't think that that's the best use of time. And I think AI can naturally understand and infer uh, and have context um, so that you aren't doing that, writing into an empty chat box. So OrcaPanda for me today is, I mean, I get big contracts sometimes. All I care about is how much are they charging me? I want to go to 20 pages. So it's going to know that, and it's going to outline all the key points. I'm going to load that document. It's going to outline all the key points of what, and then it saves it, and I have that information forever. But I also just did it in Slack. So it felt very human, natural, not like another tool that I had to use. So yeah, there's a lot of application for it.
Awesome. Well, can't wait to see what you do with that company. And I'm sure second time around at it, you'll bring all the learnings, and all of that in. And now you have this co-founder too, which is really cool. We're going to shift gears a little bit, just to kind of get into some more philosophical parts of our discussion. Before we chatted, you and I were talking about how we frame risk differently, can change our approach to things. I'd love to just hear you talk a little bit more about what that means to you.
Yeah. So when you're hiring for your startup or you're considering going to a startup, you often think, they're risky. I see them go under all the time, all of that. And, I was hearing that enough when we were like interviewing people and trying to hire. And I thought, well, what's the worst case scenario? Let's say we do this for a year. We have a great time, we learn, and then it doesn't fly. What are you going to do? Like, go get a job. And I'm like, so that's the worst case scenario. So I think it's just this understanding of when you're doing this, it's not picking forever. It's picking a path, and then you'll see where it goes from there. But if it doesn't work out, there are other avenues that you can take, unless you can only work at this one place, which, like maybe, people have made a career out of staying. I could have done that at the bank. No, but you go get another job. So I think understanding that if you can frame that risk with the right amount of context and understanding, that it doesn't feel as big of a risk, and it might be worth spending some time to explore this avenue. And the reason why I say that is, I told earlier that I didn't take a job because of a $10,000 pay cut, and then I had regret. What I don't want in my life is more regret. And so that has encouraged me to take risk, because I don't want to think back and wonder, like, what if? That to me would be really hard for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The what if is a driving force in my decision making as well.
Yeah.
And anytime I'm looking at a big life change one way or the other, I think I also have internalized that framework of being like, okay, what will I regret doing the least? Because, I could all do all those other things later, but now is like the only time to do this one. Why do you believe you don't need a conventional path to succeed in tech?
Well, I think number one, the times have changed in the sense of, it used to be that you had to stay at a company for a number of years. Otherwise, it looked like, you were flighty or whatever. But people switch all the time, and they learn so many new things. And so when I say, like, you don't need a conventional path, not everybody's meant to be a developer. Not everyone's going to be, the product person. But you can get into, there's all different other aspects from, customer management to marketing to all these other roles that still make you a part of that tech company, and you learn a lot. So I think, if you want to write software, you should probably like learn to code. But if you don't, there are a myriad of other opportunities within tech companies. So I don't subscribe that there's a certain path that you have to follow.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Speaking from experience here, right? I don't have a computer science degree. And here I am. And I went through the path of product management and learning what that looks like.
Mhm.
But I think to your point, tech is the product or, whatever it is you're selling. And then
Mhm.
all of the different job functions, are globally applicable. Like if you're great at marketing,
Absolutely.
in one given area, you can find a way to tune it for, a product in tech once you learn a little bit about it.
For sure.
Um, Last one here. Let's talk identity. One of the things you mentioned to me is that it's important to remind yourself that you are not your company.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That was a hard, that was a hard lesson for me to learn. So when I was winding down my company and selling it, I thought, okay, let's just sell everything and I'll move to another country and disappear. Because I didn't, for some reason, I thought I couldn't show up anywhere. Like, who am I without this company, right? And being years away from that, I realized there'd been other iterations of me and other things that I have done. And it wasn't this one thing that made me who I was. Um, it's a hard thing to do. And I think maybe at the time you may say, well, I don't know who else I would be. I think just think about you'll figure it out, but you are not your company. The company is it's a thing. It's a product, it's people, but it's not your identity. Your identity is everything else that you bring to the table. And I think that we're so multidimensional these days, and we display that oftentimes through our online and all of that, that like you might be a mom or you might be, a daughter and all of these things. And I think there's an appreciation for that instead of just like, I'm CEO and I only do this and you've never seen me outside of this. No, I think people appreciate like knowing that you have a life and a interest. And I kind of love like when I work with people who have other hobbies, because it makes them more interesting. So yeah, I think you definitely need to separate it as difficult as it is.
Do you have any tactics that you use to separate it for yourself on those moments where you find yourself kind of falling down the rabbit hole of, just being all in on work?
You know, um, As much as I don't have a lot of extra time, there are a couple nonprofits that I partner with. So I'm on the board of Equality Utah, which is an LGBTQ advocacy group here. And I'm also on the board of Salt Lake Community College. And so for me, in whatever time I can give, I appreciate the missions, and that allows me to like I don't know, have insight into other things that aren't necessarily OrcaPanda, but other things that I care about or that I'm missions that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Do you want to say those both again, just so everybody can hear them?
Yeah, Equality Utah is the
Quality Utah.
LGBTQ organization, and then Salt Lake Community College. So it serves it's the largest community college system in the state of Utah.
Great. Well, I'm sure that they really appreciate all of the work that you put into those foundations to help grow them, to help make them successful. I know for me, I am the parent of a young kid right now, and she's probably my hobby right now, as it just takes a lot of
Sure.
time
Yes.
when you're not working to parent a kid. And I find for me that the thing I keep telling myself is you just have to be present.
Yeah.
And so when I'm with her, just put the phone away. Don't react to all of the buzzes that come in. She'll see that. And she may internalize it. And I want to just have her know that I'm here with her in that moment. And that's really special to me.
It is. And like when you can make the school performances go, you know,
Yeah.
because you won't be able to go to all of them and that's okay. But when you're available, do those things. I think, and like I said, it's never balanced at all times. It's going to take and give and take here and there. Um, but I think also your daughter loves that the work that you do and gets to see an example, just like my daughter's like I got to like go on trips with me or like see the work that I do. They'll internalize that, and it shows them that you're also just not a dad or a mom.
Yeah.
You have other aspects of your life as well.
Which is also very important. I agree.
Yeah.
2 more questions for you. One, if you could text your younger self on the day you started your first company, what would you say?
Don't do it. No, just kidding. um, um, I think there are some people that gave me some really good advice that I did not follow. And I would say, listen to the advice that you get. Humble yourself a little bit to know that you don't have all the answers. That would definitely be one. And then I think the other thing of like, you will survive this.
That's great advice. Last one, and this is the one that we ask everyone on this podcast. For someone listening who dreams of breaking into tech but feels stuck, what's your advice?
I think number one, ask why you're stuck. Is it fear of, imposter syndrome, fear of not making money, all of those things, I'd write it down, and then I would write down the things that you can do to mitigate that. So if it's like imposter syndrome, because I'm not very well, and I don't really understand AI. Like maybe it's watching some YouTube videos, or if it's like finances, what kind of gig work could I do on the side so that I can dedicate a portion of my time? I think it's just, we often tell ourselves we can't or we're not good enough, and we put our own blockers. And this is something that I struggle with still. But for me, I need to have a plan, and I have to either see it in the map in my head or write it down to know the path to move forward. And if you truly want to do that, remove as many barriers as you can so you can do it.
It's a great place to end. What's interesting about that, I'll just kind of provide my take on your take there. We do that at work all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like every single day, my team and me sit down and we have a plan for this and a plan for that and a plan for that. Here's the path to green. This is what needs to happen. And it's so hard to do for ourselves, and I think that kind of finding a way to say no, I'm just going to do it the same way I would at work. It's this is the project. How do I get to green? This is what it looks like, so I really appreciate that as well.
Well, and who's a good companion if you don't have a team or whatever is, if you've been using ChatGPT or any of these LLMs, ask, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking about. What are some things that you see that I need to, do to make that happen? It can be just a great place to just throw ideas at the wall and discuss and refine.
Becomes kind of like an interactive note-taking environment where you're getting feedback on your thoughts.
And what low stakes. You're not putting yourself out there that much, or you're not having to go meet with someone. It's just literally typing on your computer.
Yeah. It's great. Sunny, this has been a lot of fun. Where can our listeners find you on social media or LinkedIn or anything like that?
Yeah, you can find me, Sunny Washington, on LinkedIn. You can go to the OrcaPanda.com website as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks a ton for your time. I really enjoyed this and hope to speak soon.
Thanks so much, Jared.